And thank you for getting organized, and thank you for people for attending.
It's great, isn't it? Yeah.
Mm.
I quite like, I started calling it a pop-up meeting. I quite like the way it's happened very quickly based on a sort of expression of interest. But yes, I will kick off. Welcome everybody. If you don't know me, I'm Ben Messer from Food Matters, based in Brighton, and also the network support team for the Sustainable Food Places programme. I'm not going to say much or do much other than press record and just check everybody's hearing everybody else. But it's meant to be an informal session for about an hour where there's an opportunity for people to share some of their experience around community interest companies. I'll set the scene a little bit, then it's over to you, really. I'm going to suggest that we try and stick to 1 hour, and after that you can follow up with each other through emails and connections that you may make. I'll make a plug for Peerlink if you want to go and visit each other and make a bit more of the sort of getting together. That would also be really good if you did that. If you want to speak or if you want to add anything, use chat or put your hand up like this and I'll hopefully see you, or use the reactions button where you can actually put a hand up like I've just done on mine there, just so that we know if anybody wants to join in and say anything. I'm going to keep admitting people as they come in, but this all started with, as I was just suggesting, with a question to the Rise Up list. Rise Up list is a brilliant place to just sort of float a question out and see what comes back. And the question came in from Sonia Woodcock, who can see there Foodwise leads, Zest leads, a really big open question. You know, we're looking into becoming a CIC and we want to explore that potential and find out if any other people have had experience of setting up a CIC or looked into it and maybe decided against it. That's also useful stuff. And a lot of information started coming in. So we want to look really at the benefits and the challenges of becoming a CIC. I can see already that Ian has followed my instructions and put his hand up and wants to say anything. You're on mute at the moment, Ian. I just mentioned that.
Yes, thank you. So no, it's great to see you all. So what I just wanted to say from the very outset really is it's interesting how this has emerged as a conversation about CICs, when I think what it is, it's a bigger conversation about social enterprise. Because the CIC is one form that it lends itself to a social enterprise, but there are many others that could potentially do so. And so I just wanted to say from the outset, the key thing is of form following function. So if you really need to work out what this body is going to do and how it's going to do it before choosing a legal form. So it might be a CIC, it could be a charitable incorporated associate organization. It could be even an industrial and providence society or something like that. So I just thought it's important not to put the cart before the horse in terms of that. I understand the CIC model. In fact, it's the one we chose for Plymouth, but that we had quite a rigorous process for deciding on why CIC. So I just thank you for indulging me on that, but I just wanted that on the table from the outset. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Have you been reading my notes, Ian? It's a very good point, though.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
But I think I've asked, based on the responses that came onto Sonia's initial question, 3 key voices emerged, I think, and I've asked 3 people to sort of specifically share their experience. Ian being one of them. Food Plymouth is a CIC, and he's been through that process. We're looking at pros and cons. Sam Dyer, also the coordinator there in Cambridge. I've asked Sam to share some of her experience. Again, a wealth of experience there. I'll ask you to actually introduce yourselves when we come around to the conversation. And I've also asked Holly Whitelaw from Cornwall, and I can't actually see if Holly's with us yet. I'm not sure if she's made it. But if she joins us, all well and good. But again, Holly posted some really interesting responses, and I think she's been involved in setting up CICs in the past. The other thing I'll do before we get going is just a quick plug for the SFP Toolkit. Sonia said that she'd also looked at the SFP resources before getting going. I had another quick look. There's 2 key resources in the toolkit: the Organizational Structures and Legal Status Toolkit, written mainly by Sarah Davis, and she very kindly put my name as a co-author there, but it was mainly her, and also Food Partnership Structures. So 2 resources there that you can look at. 2 key things that I looked at and pulled out when I just read them again this week. Don't get bogged down. You may not need to do this yet. It may actually slow you down. If you're quite in the early stages, it's more important to go out and listen to people than start to think about legal structure straight away. So don't get bogged down in it too soon. It may not be necessary yet. And the other one was the one that Ian had just said. Structure must meet your partnership's needs. So form following function. Work out what it is you want to do and find out the structure that fits that best to achieve your aims and objectives. Very briefly, community interest companies, formed under the Companies Act 2006, a flexible alternative to charities and industrial providence societies, but specifically designed to support and be a model to be used by social enterprises, as Ian pointed out. As I said, he's been reading my notes, but that's what the thinking was behind this. A lot of people are looking at how can we be a company where all of our assets and all of our profits are turned back into our local communities and are for the public good. So it's a company plus, in a way, company structure plus. It's got 2 extra things: an asset lock, which means that when you have assets or when you make profits, they can only be distributed to other charities or other community interest companies. The other thing is they need to pass a community interest test, which is, are you actually working to the benefit of your community? So those are the 2 key things. I'm not going to say any more. I'm not an expert on this. My job was just to bring you together. The way I thought I would do this would be to have a conversation with those the great people who have agreed to come along. So Ian, Sam, and Holly, who hasn't joined us yet. No. So I might actually then, if it's okay, and Ian, I know that you might need to leave us at some point, but I think it might be quite useful to go to Sam first of all, to first of all share with us, Sam, your experience, why you have had experience around CICs, what that entailed.
Sure. So we've had a partnership in Cambridge since 2013. So almost 10 years, I guess, this year. So we were one of the first, and we didn't actually, we were an unincorporated community organisation for a long time, and that really suited us. It was fine. The partnership formed that unincorporated community organisation, and correct me if anybody knows any different, but my understanding is that we were able to hold up to about £5,000 worth in funds. At some point towards that end of that 5-year sort of stretch, we started to pull in more funding, which meant that we really needed a structure that was able to hold funds. And at that time, we did try to go down the charity route, but the Charities Commission, I don't know any other SFP partnership or that has managed to set up a charity to undertake all of the SFP sort of key issues. That might have happened since the last time I looked into it, but for some reason the Charities Commission, and we've tried since, and in its entirety the work, the Charities Commission just doesn't seem to like. So I know you sort of said make form meets function, but actually we had to ram something into a structure that we weren't necessarily needing or wanting, which was the kick. And actually I think that over the past 5 years, from when we even in the past 5 years, it has become more of a recognised sort of type of structure for community work, which funders recognise. So some of the old sort of private, I guess, funds that always say we will only ever fund a charity sort of have moved a little bit on that sort of funding, accepting funding. So that what really helps with that is the asset lock, and we're a not-for-profit. So Those are sort of baked in for us. So it works for us. I think the nature of the work of the SFP partnerships, and therefore our kick, is quite sprawling in a way, because of those 6 key issues are very sprawling. So it's everything from business, business work, working with businesses, right the way through to our food poverty work. And actually, I think as with the time's gone on over the past 5 years, it's quite sprawling, and the work potentially needs a different structure now, which might mean hiving off some of it into a charity, or different sort of business structures. But that probably would have happened even if we were a charity, so it's not necessarily a kick specific thing. Our kick is, in its articles, we reference the 6 key issues. So we've tried to tie in the partnership with the kick. So whilst there are members, there are directors of the kick that are members of the partnership, it is the kick that is a member of it in and of itself of that partnership. So it becomes a matter of thinking through what the relationship is of that kick to your partnership board. You're going to have to stop me, Ben, because I can ramble for quite a while. I've got quite a list. So yes, the relationship of your kick to your partnership board. So we act as a backbone organisation to that partnership board. So we do the secretariat, we write the documents, we do the media, we do we invite partners to work together on our gold ambition. At the moment we're going for the gold award, but and again, this is potentially not a kick thing, but one thing to consider is, once you take the center of activity away from that partnership board acting as an unincorporated body into another organization, that organization then takes on some of the activities, I guess, and responsibility for the activities, and you've almost got like a 2-tier organization going on. Because I mean, dear God, we called our kick the same as we called our partnership, which is just, it causes confusion to this day. And I would advise anybody, do not call your kick the same as your partnership board with CIC on the end, because you have to keep reiterating that the kick is a separate organization, it's a separate business to the partnership. So there's stuff around relationships there in terms of your stakeholders, your directors of your kick, maybe your staff, your supporters, your members, the partnership board, and sometimes it all feels quite complicated in terms of communicating messages. It's a great structure. It's well trusted. One of the issues we have is with funders, in as much as we can't just make all our staff the directors of the kick. We need to have some unpaid or non-exec directors of the kick, because that's the way funders like it. They don't want, specifically some of our local authority funders want to see that there's we're almost operating it as a charity, so that we have less people, I guess, relying on their wages for that. But otherwise, we found it very easy to attract funding and to apply for funding, and it's a well-known structure. I think that'll do, Ben. It's enough.
That's great. No, that's fantastic to kick us off. I'm particularly interested in this idea that the kick is settled in, so people do to some extent accept it now as an alternative to the charity, and one which sort of has a charitable function to some extent, even if it's not actually registered with a charities commission. That's quite interesting, I think. I think it's also interesting that it's it's not ideal. It's never going to be exactly ideal. You have to squeeze yourself into that form, not really happily in a way, in order to be able to do what you were going to do, your function, basically. So that's interesting as well. I'll just mention one thing about charity. Again, this is picked straight from the resources in the toolkit, that the Charity Commission apparently were unhappy with this idea of promoting independent food business. So as soon as you put that into your mission statement, and it's very prominent in a lot of mission statements for food partnerships, the Charity Commission said, oh, you can't do that, that's anti-competitive, that's promoting certain businesses above others. It's a tricky one. They also didn't like the idea of developing local food systems, which is core to what we're doing. But if you call it a sustainable food system rather than a local food system, it seems to squeeze through from experience. Again, that's sort of interesting if you are looking down the charity line. But I'm not sure, but I think I might be wrong, but I think Exeter maybe have become a CIO. So there may be some learning from Exeter there, and it might, I'll check that, but I think it might be quite interesting to look into that a little bit. So does anybody have anything they want to sort of unpick a little bit with Sam before we get a bit of Ian's experience? There's a lot in there, but I think there's some very interesting sort of key things. I love the top tip. And if there are other top tips like that, let's grab them, but don't call your CIC the same thing as your food partnership. Have a distinct name. It's a distinct thing. It's a company. So that is quite an interesting point. And again, we might sort of, if anybody wants to really understand that a bit deeper, we can ask Sam to sort of expand on that a little bit. But I thought that was brilliant to have that top tip. So anybody want to, yeah, hi Trin.
Hi, sorry. That was really interesting, Sam. I'm just kind of a bit confused about all the different questions that you have. So you've got this like partnership board, and then the secretariat, and then also the CIC. Right? Is that what you were saying?
The CIC acts as a secretariat for the partnership. And the partnership, I guess, is, we call it a partnership board, but it would be, yeah. We started off and are still very much, we weren't part of another organization. We came together as a voluntary group that pulled together partners. So we didn't sit with public health or any of the others, which makes that sort of difference. So there was nobody, there was never anybody else acting as a secretariat. So it was sort of this almost a natural progression.
Right. And so your partnership board is just those made up of those different partners that kind of set it. I mean, it's probably changed a little bit over time, but you know, it's right. So it's yeah.
So we try and make sure we've got somebody from every sort of food sector in the city on that partnership board. So be that the community sector or the business sector, or you know, someone that's working on food insecurity, or the local authority. So we try and, you know, ensure that that is there.
Thank you.
Any more thoughts on what we've just heard from Sam? We might dig in. I know that that was quite a broad introduction to your experience of CICs. If there are specific benefits and specific challenges, we might come back to you for those as well, Sam, if that's okay. If there's nothing more at this point, I will now ask Ian to sort of share a similar sort of general introduction to your experience of CICs before we go more specifically into what you see as key benefits and key challenges. And maybe if you've got any top tips, that would be also very handy to hear those.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Great, thank you. No, I'd back up everything Sam has said. I think that was a really good introduction and overview. Thank you, Sam. It is interesting with the name piece. Maybe you'll start with that, because we're the same. So we had Food Plymouth, and then we ended up with Food Plymouth CIC. we sort of divide that up to explain it, because we, like you, are the infrastructure organization that provides the support. In a sense, we're in one level, we ought to be less to do with food and more about providing various forms of business support to the partnership and network, basically, to avoid some of those conflicts that you spoke of, really. So, I mean, what we've got is the Food Plymouth Partnership and Network. We've got a core team drawn from that partnership and network that does most of the heavy lifting. That's about 7 of us. And then we've got some of us are with the community interest company that provides the infrastructure organization. And what I say about that is we're the same as core team members. And if you notice anything I'll put on the bottom of an email, it's, Food Plymouth core team and CIC. And that's because really the CIC people are the ones carrying extra responsibility, but shouldn't have any more privileges, if you get my drift, or any more power, because it's important that the CIC or the infrastructure supports the partnership and network and support, services it and enables it, not in any way takes it over or tries to over influence it. And there's a mutual responsibility there as well, because I mean the whole point about having a separate organization is to take the legal, technical, financial risk away from the partners and actually carry all of that. So there has to be an acknowledgement and respect for that some people take that extra burden on as directors, company secretary, officers, whatever. Whereas the everyone else in the partnership and network has to understand that and not to take daft risks or ask them to take daft risks if that's it's no skin off their nose, but it could potentially bankrupt the infrastructure organization and wreck the support. So it's a thing of not cutting off the branch you're sitting on, I guess is the phrase I would use about that. So I think, I mean, on a really absolutely key thing to do, I think, if you go a CIC route, is to make sure that you're limited by guarantee, not by shares. There is a choice to be made. And I don't fully understand how the shares thing works with the asset lock. That to me seems to be in tension with itself. But there are 1 or 2 CICs limited by shares. And I think guarantee is the way to go, and that gives you that more charity feel, which institutional bodies would be much more happy, and grant givers and so on would be more keen to do, I think. And it is interesting. I think the CIC has grown in that way. Our journey to becoming a CIC was really interesting. It's rather different than Sam's, because I remember in the early days, Sam, when you were setting up the CIC, I spoke with Bev and shared learning from Plymouth, which has hopefully been somewhat helpful. But our journey was really interesting, where we were an unincorporated association under the Soil Association, and then we had a Soil Association appointed coordinator, and we didn't really know we were born at that point, I don't think, because we just had to do the work, and the Soil Association carried all of the legal, technical infrastructure, all that lovely background stuff was done, insured, the whole bunch, and then as that was being withdrawn, we had to go a self-dependency, self-sufficiency route. And so we looked at it. At the time, Plymouth had just become a social enterprise city, the first in the UK. And I think we've got some feedback here. Is it possible to mute if you're not speaking? I can hear an echo, and is that okay? And so we looked into all of what we wanted to do. Got some help with writing articles and memorandum of association. Also came up with, and this would be another top tip, came up with a code of conduct, a memorandum of understanding about how everything would work together and who would do what and who would carry what responsibilities. And we built into that anyone that was, directly involved and had positions of power and influence were signing up to Nolan principle type code of conduct of selflessness and not pursuing organizational interest, because I think it's a point with partnerships generally, but certainly when you've got an infrastructure organization, you don't want an overly powerful self-interested, not managing the self-interest. I'm not saying any of you've got any of those, or I'm not saying we've got any of those, but you know, to come in and start trying to steer things in their direction, you know, to the detriment of others. What we always said was, and this is what, and so we got our help from Plymouth Social Enterprise Network, which had recently set up, and that was really interesting because they set up as a CIC as well, and they were really helpful to us, and that we borrowed from their approach that we were supporting a network of different people pursuing different things, and what we could do as the CIC was to, we certainly never ever cannibalize anything that the network, the partnership and network were doing. So we couldn't compete internally with the partnership and network, but what we could do to earn money, which we had to do because that was the whole point of the self-sufficiency thing, was to we could fill gaps. If there was a gap and no one looked like they were going to fill it, we could go in and fill that. And we've done that actually quite successfully on a number of things. And we could also innovate if there was an innovation required and no one else was innovating in that space and didn't look like they were going to be, we could innovate into that space and then draw people in. And again, we've done that reasonably successfully as well. So I think those are some of the key things. So we've slimmed down a lot. We ended up with I think 7 people were founder directors of it. And I think that was the entire, at the time, the partnership board. And we slimmed down fairly rapidly to 2 plus a company secretary, which is frankly too small. It means you can be immensely agile, but it is too small. And any sort of conflict of interest is very difficult to manage because it gets very personal very quick. And I've been, for several years now, been trying to expand that back up to probably about 5. And the point about non-exec directors was very well made. And I think non-execs have got a really important place to play in this. And from our point of view, I'm looking at it that people possibly not connected with food at all, but that are very good with particular skills in certain areas, you know, like finance, for example, is a good one. We've got a very good company secretary on the legal front. Don't need anything there, but you know, things like communications and marketing and that side of things, you know, you've got specialist people with great skills who are not connected with the food industry, and therefore very difficult, well, relatively difficult for them to have conflicts of interest and loyalty as well, which is quite handy. And just take an objective view and say, well, you know, no, don't do it that way. Think about another way of doing it. I think those are key things I would share. I hope that's reasonably helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for that. I think that's fantastic. Some real nuggets in there. I love this, the way you said the CIC supports and services the partnership and network. That's its role to some extent. I think your top tips are on point. You know, this top tip of a really clear code of conduct, memorandum of understanding, how you're going to behave towards each other, really vital as well. And sort of reiterating what Sam said about non-executive members, people from outside food realm, in a way, with good skills, particularly organizational skills, I think is really very, very good top tip. I suppose the question to everybody else here is, does that, you know, Ian's starting point and journey, and Sam as well, talking about where they came from and why they made that decision, can you see yourselves in that same place now? Can you, does it resonate with you? Yes, I know, Sonia, you're saying you need to sort of consider moving on from being an unincorporated body into something. Was that to do with holding funds? You know, that was Sam's starting point in a way, or is it something else? Is there a resonance with where you are now, and you can see CIC being a way forward?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, because we are, you know, unlike these two, we're housed within a charity, so
Yeah.
we have to fit within the charitable aims of the host organization, and like 90% of what we do does, but there's the little gray area. And if we continue to grow that area, then we're sort of in conflict. So that was sort of one of the ways that we were looking at it. And yeah, and just to see whether I don't know. I don't think we're strong enough at the moment. I don't think we've got the right people around to support a removal. But it's just something, you know, it's just really interesting. And I think it's about getting the ducks in a row and seeing where we go and how we develop and all those things to consider. It's just been, yeah, really insightful. So more
Yeah.
top tips, bring them on.
That really interesting relationship that you have. I suppose the first thing to say is it always amazes me the incredible diversity of the partnerships in the SFP network. You're all so completely unique in a way that there's no generalizations here, but coming from a starting point where you're within a charity, there are others, partnerships within charities who may find the same situation and the same sort of test of what they're trying to establish. But that relationship, the CIC, social enterprise and charity, they're quite good bedfellows. They sort of work quite well together. You know, CIC is by many funders and other people seen as almost equivalent to a charity. It has this community interest. It has this public good that it's doing. It's for the public good. So interesting things to unpick. Right, I'm going to go straight back to Ian, who wants to respond to that. And I see a big question in chat, which I might ask Callum, actually, if you can read through that whilst we're having a quick look with what Ian is saying. But thank you for the comment there. That's interesting.
Okay. No, it's really fascinating that, Sonia, on the situation. So Foodwise Leeds is already a charity, is it? No, it's not. So
No, we're unincorporated.
but you're within a charity.
We're within a charity called Zest.
Ah, right, and hence your colleague with Zest on here. So Zest, in a sense, is at the moment, sorry, I understand now. So Zest is providing the infrastructure support for you as a charity at the moment, as an unincorporated association at the moment, something like that.
Well, Zest employs us, so it provides all of that cushiness.
Right.
And the, you know, the bank account and, you know, the charitable structure from which we can draw down funds.
Right.
But we provide the secretariat to the partnership.
Right.
But
employed through people employed by Zest.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's quite interesting. It's quite, I was going to draw on an analogy from some other work that I do, which isn't directly food related, but that's an organization that's set up as a charity. It's a community development organization, basically a community regeneration organization, which set up as a company, a charity, as a company limited by guarantee as its legal form. You need that when you are a charity to have that. So it's a charity and a company limited by guarantee. When faced with a big trading opportunity to generate funds for community benefit, it then set up a dedicated CIC as almost a wholly owned subsidiary of the charity to do that trading piece and to manage the risk and almost create a firewall in case this big but risky trading thing didn't quite come off and went down. It didn't drag everything else with it. And so I think that's an interesting place to go in terms of, you know, you can, because what I didn't say in our piece is that the reason we ended up with the CIC was not unlike what Sam said, is that my analogy for it was an adjustable spanner. It wasn't the ideal tool for anything, but it was the least worst fit with all the things that we were trying to do. And it did have the flexibility that Sam mentioned of being able to adjust and adapt into other things later. So it was a kind of holding measure in a sense with the CIC that we set up, but actually it's turned out to perform pretty well, actually. But that idea of having a main body, so it's a bit like a charity with a trading arm, isn't it? Sometimes there's a charity that's actually got a direct trading arm, and the money can only ever come out of the trading arm into the charity, not the other way around. So maybe that's the thing to do, because in a sense you might have something that was, if Zest would like you to move out and be your own, or for other reasons you are moving out to be your own, you could look at that, main model with with some kind of subsidiary as well, if that's any help. But maybe we'll have that conversation offline, but I thought it might be helpful to other people listening to this. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. And again, going back to what Sam was saying, that they may be considering a charitable subsidiary or a charitable arm to their CIC. Is that right, Sam? Is that what you were?
Yeah, I think it's the nature of the work of the SFP program is that the work is so wide and varied, and as you said, Ben, each partnership is very, very different. Some are hosted within local authorities, some are hosted within charities such as yours, Sonia, some such as ours and Plymouth have arisen from the ground up and weren't ever, I mean, apart from your soil association, weren't particularly ever hosted by a parent organization. So I think the transition for those that weren't ever hosted by another organization is probably a simpler route, because yes, there'll be a lot that you will be guessing from your parent organization that you won't want to lose. So, and the charity can't do the business work of the SFP program. So it's just a bit of a conundrum around how that gets supported, promoted, or done, I guess. And same with us, we had an explosion of emergency food provision during the pandemic. We're still doing a lot of that work. The KIC is not the main vehicle for charitable donations, for which, you know, really ramped up and we'd like to maintain, but obviously we can't claim gift aid on that. And we have to be really, really clear with people that want to donate. They refer to us as a charity because we're doing sort of not-for-profit food, emergency food work. So they refer to us as a charity, and they have to be really clear that we're not a charity with people. And so it can cause confusion, I think. So it's that real clarity of what people see from the outside as well as structures internally.
Great, thank you, Sam. The question that Nancy from Eastbourne has put into the chat there, did you want to respond to that, Callum? Or it's interesting, you know, you do have to have quite a lot of these sort of policies and protocols set up within your structures, and we've done this before with memorandums of understanding and things like that have been shared, and I think are available in some of our resources. I'd have to have a think about exactly where they are, but they can be shared. The only thing I would say is that some of those policies are worth developing from scratch. There's a purpose of doing it, to go through the purpose of working with your board or with your steering group or with key partners to work out what you really think about diversity and inclusion, for instance, to have those conversations and develop your own, which, you know, will probably look similar to other people's policies, but the process, you know, I'm the king of process. The process is important to have those conversations in order to develop your policy. So you know, some of it is off the shelf. I think you could probably go for some stuff off the shelf, but consider going through the process for some of those policies. Did you want to say anything, Callum? I don't know if there's anything. No. Okay. Interesting. It does my head in a bit, I have to say. There's a lot of information there, but everything that I'm hearing from both Ian and Sam, I think, is extremely valuable. I love this, Ian's adjustable spanner. It's the least worst thing. It's not the best fit necessarily, but it's the least worst and flexible. You can adjust it. You can, it has flexibility built into it, which I think is one of the benefits of this model above others, which may be a little bit more rigid. Is there anything else in terms of challenges that you've both faced when sort of going through this process that we haven't touched on yet? You've heard each other. Is there any gap you want to fill in your experience of that was a tricky thing and we never really solved it? The other thing I'll just float out as a question to everybody is, who's looked at CICs and thought, nah, not for us? And why did you think that? We're not a huge group, so there may not be anybody who's been down that line, but first of all, either Sam or Ian, you know, key challenges and how you addressed them. I know you've touched on it already to some extent.
I'm not sure there are. I mean, and I think I've touched on the challenges for us, and I think actually Ian reiterated some of those, which is, but I think they're not particularly. You could be any structure, and you could just be a limited company. If you become a backbone organization for a partnership and you're trying to raise funds and pay staff and keep your organization alive, you have got to necessarily sort of deal with the conflict that makes you maybe more partial than others in that partnership. So yeah, there's a, if you're a backbone organization, then really what you need to be doing is just supporting, promoting, developing, bringing people together to form those partnerships. If you are a CIC, and we know that the funding environment out there is very project driven, and not this sort of network development, you know, there's not much out there for that type of work, then yeah, you can be in conflict. But I don't think that's a CIC thing. I think that's a structural thing that would happen whatever you were. Yeah, if you're not a charity, you don't get all the benefits of being a charity. There's some funds out there you can't get hold of, and you'll probably end up finding yourself ending up acting as if you were a charity, in terms of most of your income coming from funding pots rather than potential trading, which at the end of the day, a CIC, I think, in the main is set up as a social enterprise model, whereby you know, trade is one of the things that you should be doing, but we use it to draw in funding pots that way. Yeah, I think that's about the key ones, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Sonia.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to come back to Ian. He said that you fill in gaps. You found opportunities for is that for fundraising, and is that, I'm just intrigued to know what they are, because I get the feeling they're outside of food. It's more to do with being a social enterprise.
No, it tends to be, you know, I think it's been universally about food. Doesn't have to be, potentially, but I think it could be a bit of a rabbit hole to go down on that. But but I mean, if I just touch on what Sam was saying there, so there's something about, I mean, the social, what I would recommend to everyone on the call and listening to the recording is Social Enterprise UK and also Social Enterprise Mark are well worth engaging with. Look at their resources, because they set a good standard, like a benchmark for what a good social enterprise would look like, and there's a lot of benefit in that. So really, the SEUK Social Enterprise UK definition looks at a social enterprise aiming to have at least 50% of its income, its revenue, generated by earnings rather than grants, and you know, it's shifting away from the gifts and grants economy into a more of a trading economy. And that's quite an interesting philosophical point, basically within the entire SFP world, because a lot of people, you know, there's almost an instinctive recoiling away from the models along those lines. So I think there's a bigger conversation to be had about that, and some tensions to be managed really on that, just to be, you know, perfectly frank and sort of blunt on that, really. And so really with ourselves, I mean, the interesting thing, when we launched out on our journey of becoming a social enterprise, and you know, the CIC was formed and launched as the Soil Association support was being withdrawn, one of the big issues we faced was actually generating enough money to actually, you know, keep the infrastructure alive. And that was a real battle for a number of years. It really was. And so in answer to to Sonia's original point, what does filling gaps look like? Filling gaps looks like providing services, well, selling services basically, and being commissioned to deliver projects and other activities where you pay people to deliver those services, but you charge a management fee, and then you put the management fee in to cover things like I think someone's asked questions on somewhere else on here I've seen of, you know, because you need to ensure the partnership and make sure you've got sufficient public liability and employers and professional liability insurances in place for that side of it. You need to have your accounts prepared professionally, and that costs several £100s a year, depending on what size you are, and can be more than that if you're bigger. You know, pay all the bills, keep the lights on, whatever. And we've done that by actually not having a physical base, so we've got a very low fixed cost. But you do need to make sure you cover all those things. So you need to be making enough along the way. And that can be through a mix of gifts, grants, and earnings. But we're at the moment delivering a lot in terms of services, often for the city council. And we get a management fee for doing that. At the moment, we tend to charge a 10% management fee on everything we do, which is very low. But it means we can do really good value for money, and we can make enough out of that if we've got enough volume to keep everything going. So an example of the gap filling piece is a really interesting project we're just getting going with, where we've been working with the council in Central Park, big park in the centre of Plymouth, for a long time now on a project up there, and they were keen to do community composting on that site for various reasons. And so we are actually going to be doing up to 85 tons of composting on there, and we're providing a whole bunch of services into that. Yeah, so we're going to be paid, and there's a whole bunch of other things go with that. I won't go into that now; it's too detailed. But we're going to make money out of that and provide a really useful service and lots of educational stuff and all other good things around that. Shall I stop there? But we can have this conversation offline. I can give you some more specific examples if that's helpful.
It's really useful stuff, Ian. Thank you so much for that. You know, the realities of how your CIC can actually step in and take and deliver, basically delivering services for your local authority, which is very interesting, I'm sure, to many people listening to this. As is 85 tons of compost.
I know. This will involve. I keep telling people this will involve tractors. It's not forks and wheelbarrows. So yes.
But fascinating. They you know, the administrative overheads of running a food partnership and its infrastructure organization, which I think that those distinctions are really good. As you said, the infrastructure organization supports and services the partnership and the network, but also fills the gaps, is commissioning people to deliver services and covering its own administrative overheads and backline costs, if you like. Which fascinates me. That sounds really interesting, and I'm sure is interesting to many of the partnerships in the network, because it means you survive. It means you continue to function. It's core to a lot of people's thinking. You know, we're supporting communities, we're supporting people who find themselves in vulnerable situations, but you can't do that if you can't survive as an organization. And Food Plymouth is showing one way to do that, through this sort of balancing your partnership with your CIC as the infrastructure support, delivering services for the local authority. Fascinating. Right, blimey. Any other questions? We're doing okay for time. We've got sort of 6 or 7 more minutes. If any other questions from anybody here who's participating, or again, if anything has come up in your mind whilst Ian was talking there, Sam, anything you want to chip in, but also people in the room here, you know, how are you going to use this information? Do you think that's going to make you go away and look more deeply at CICs? Do you think you're going to get on the phone to Ian and Sam straight away? Do you think, as Nancy was saying, it would be useful to have these some of these policies, or how you go, now I've seen your comment, Nancy, how you go about developing those policies would be useful to post following this session? We'll have the recording up, but we could put some resources there as well in a very rough form, not toolkits or anything like that, but we could post, as Simon said, she's very willing to share some of the policies in Cambridge. We could put those onto the website along with this recording, I imagine. Yeah, Trin.
Thank you for organising the event, and also thanks Sam and Ian. It's been a pretty interesting session. I guess I would say that my take up from this is that it's just probably not going to happen until that sounds like a lot, way too much. I think, like Sonia, we're also hosted by a charity. I'm the only person who really works on this, plus my chief exec, but I'm hosted by a charity. I just don't have any. It just sounds like what you're doing is amazing, but I just don't have any of the resources to kind of do any of that stuff. And it made me a little bit sad because, like, in my volunteer stuff before I took on this role, we did set up a CIC for our volunteer stuff, and then we didn't really use it. So we just kind of did put all this work into setting up a CIC. And now the organization's just sort of dwindled down to 2 people, and we just don't have, so we've got this vehicle, but we don't have a use for it. So I was trying to think, from what you were talking about, I was trying to think whether in some way I could use that vehicle, which is a little bit more limited because we're focused on food insecurity, to then do something with a partnership. But I think I don't think that's a goer. So, but yeah, it was very interesting.
Yeah, Ian, you have a response there.
Yeah, I think so. It is interesting. I mean, what I would say about that is that the 2 things are very different disciplines, and that's what I always said about the CIC being effectively a business services organization. That the people that are very, very good on the front line doing the partnership and networking stuff very often don't have the mindset or the worldview or the skill set, to be effective company directors and things like that. And what you need is effective company directors. So there's almost like a distinction of roles there, that maybe if the directors are involved in food, to do less of that and more of the company and organizational development stuff. And the people that are really good on, the food insecurity end or the growing end or the cookery and education end, they concentrate on that and don't get bogged down in all the very essential, but also really can be quite a grinding process running a company, and that the energies go the right way. Then the people with the energy to do the grind on the company side and that side of it do that, and the ones on the food and partnership side do that. They need to relate to each other, obviously, and be a good, strong, proper relationship. But I would say that it's a division of skills and labor and interest really is the way to go. And then you need to then present the company as a thing. You could do a really interesting thing, even if you don't know about food. You could be a director of this. You could make a big difference to these people on the front line doing wonderful stuff. That's the way to do that. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Ian. That's really good tip again. Good bit of steer. Sam, you had your hand up.
Yeah. So yes, there is something in here that, yes, it is quite onerous, the tasks around running a business. That's what you're doing when you're setting up a CIC. Whatever it is you're doing, you are still running a business. So you still have to ensure that your accounts are done, that your budgeting's done, that if you're employing staff, your HR is done, that you're in compliance with anything that you need to be in compliance with. So there is a whole host of just business skills that apply to a kick that you could be selling widgets or cuddly toys. It's the same skill set. And then you've got the food angle to that. So yeah, I wouldn't set up a CIC lightly unless you can, and more my time as, I guess, the CEO of the kick is spent doing those essential business things. I don't do delivery anymore. I'm literally sat at a desk making sure our policies are in order, making sure our budgets are done, making sure we can pay our staff, all of that malarkey that goes with it. The flip side of that is that you have complete control over what you're doing. So you're not sat in a charity that says, no, actually you can't do that, or we need you to do this, or this is your remit, or whatever. So it allows you to be agile, and as Ian says, you know, choose where you work and in what niches you work, where you can sort of flow into, and that keeps it exciting and fun, and all of those things that come along with being in control of your own destiny rather than at the behest of and a larger, potentially slower moving organization.
That's a brilliant way to round this off, I think, Sam. You know, there is responsibility. You're running a business, but you have control. You know, it's a tricky decision. Sonia, having heard everything that we've just been having conversations about, you asked the initial conversation, do you think this has been helpful? Do you think it's helped you unpick things a bit?
Oh, I think it's been really helpful. I think like having those really honest, you know, what some of the challenges are, as well as what the benefits are. And I think sometimes, like when you are hosted within a charity, there's really cushy elements about it. And it's sort of like, you know, I've got a finance manager. I don't have to do any of that, those budgets, you know, HR is taken care of. I don't deal with that sort of thing. And so there's sort of like, oh, I've got to make sure that we can bring in enough. At the moment, our funding's not secure enough to be able to take that risk, to know that I'm going to be able to pay the, you know, get the accounts done or whatever, or I've got enough people. I've got a food partnership meeting this afternoon, and I've got more cancellations coming in, you know, so people aren't prioritizing the meeting. So we're not in a position at the moment, but really, really useful. You know, that we're definitely much more aware. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I'm going to say a massive thank you to Sam and to Ian. I think we'll take you up on your offer of posting some of your policies, protocols, things, models that maybe people could look at. I don't think we would presume within our program to filter those. I think if you put them there, people can make of them what they will, and use them in whichever way they want. We can give some guidance on how, on the process, if you like, how to do this in a participatory way. I would, Nancy, point you at the, there's a tool, the Ready for Change review tool, which helps you have conversations, which can help you develop your policies if you steer them in that direction. Have a look at that. All of you have a look at that if you want to. Peerlink, Sam, you mentioned maybe Peerlink can do this. Peerlink is more for getting your heads together, either online or in person, and finding the right people to put heads together, and maybe supporting with some expenses that getting together, rather than sharing information and resources in that way. It's more of a person-to-person thing. But please feel free to sort of, if either Sam or Ian are willing to, you could contact them and maybe travel and spend half a day talking through in more detail, or do that online. But they would have their support that they provide to you, their advice. They could take they could be recompensed for that time and effort they put into providing that support, either on the phone or on a call or in person. So that's the purpose of Peerlink. So do look at it if you think that's a good idea. Ian, I know you missed a meeting with your partnership in order to be here, so we're very, very grateful, and thank you so much for your insight. Sam, likewise, I know how busy you are. I'll let you get back to your desk to run your business, but thank you so much. I think that was fascinating. For me, I've learned a lot, and I hope everybody else has. We'll put the recording up on the website. We'll put, if you want to share with me, Sam and Ian, any of those policies and information resources that you think might be useful, we could find a way of putting those in the news section maybe of the website. But other than that, pretty good. It's just gone past. I like these pop-ups. If stuff comes up on Rise Up, I think I don't mind convening, or another member of the team can convene, but it's over to you. It's about you sharing with each other. So that's what the purpose of this was. And I would say, small but very neat little group. We've done a good job. We've shared some experience. We'll do it again, and we'll record it. Thank you very
Brilliant.
much for coming, everybody.
Okay,
Thank you, everyone. Do
And
get in
thanks for
touch.
convening, Ben, as well. Appreciate that.
Very welcome, Ian. It's good to see you. Thank you for
All
coming.
right. Bye bye. Bye bye bye.
Okay, thanks everyone.